All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Fearless. This is my buddy,
Matt here.
and we are a different view. And today we're gonna kind of switch things up a little bit, and we actually brought some guests with us. And today we're gonna talk a little bit about feminism. What is it? What's the definition? And kind of go from there. So,
Our guest names?
yes.
I'm Christy,
I'm Aubrey.
and I'll let Aubrey start off.
Oh, all right. So you wanted us to talk about the definition of feminism and what it means to us,
Well,
right?
yeah. I mean, I looked it up when we had our conversation, but maybe somebody else doesn't know. So,
Right. So in general, feminism is the kind of a basic idea. It's that women should have the same kind of rights, opportunities, and privileges that men have. Basically, that everybody gets the same, regardless of what gender you are or race or anything like that. Feminism to me looks like the ability to take up space, whether that's space in history, to be remembered for things that I've done or that other women have done, or like physical space in terms of just walking down the street. If you ever notice, you tend to move aside for men, but if you look straight ahead like you're going somewhere, weirdly they tend to get out of your way. So I like to take up space. And then the other part of what feminism means to me is the idea that my experiences and the way that I've lived my life can and ought to affect the environment that I'm in. So I would want things that affect me to be taken into account when someone is, say, designing a product or planning a city or writing a job description, something like that.
And to me, I'd written it down because I knew I'd have trouble remembering it. It is to me equality amongst genders. I think it just shouldn't be only men or only women. I think we should include all genders without suppression of their voice or judgment of the role that they play in our society. Because I think often we forget about women that don't have kids, women that choose to have kids, women that choose to just exist. They don't have to have any kind of product.
Mm-hmm.
So then you focus on the voice of, I don't know that from talking, but like your focus is more on, you want to focus typically, it seems like on taking up space, which I say from our conversation before, but then also you tend to focus on the voice of it, which is a funny distinction to me. I don't, it's not,
Yeah. As a small person, I tend to not get the most space.
Okay.
So maybe my voice has to be bigger.
Yeah, okay, maybe. So do you think then that with feminism being a desire for equality, do you think that there is, in fact, and this might sound like a dumb question, but whatever, is there inequality? Is there a gap between the treatment of genders?
Yes, there definitely is. And you can see it in a couple of really interesting ways. Do you mind if I take this
No,
one? Sorry,
go for
I
it.
just jumped in, taking up space. One of the common things that you might run into as you begin to read about feminism is the idea that, well, women really just haven't done a whole lot historically. And that simply isn't the case, and you can see how it's kind of played out in the sense that women have done an equal amount of things, we just aren't remembered for them. A perfect example that I like to use is the 17th century symphony composer, Barbara Strozzi. She had more popular music in print in her lifetime than any other composer of that era. Nobody knows who she is anymore.
Yeah.
The reason for that is fairly simple. One of her colleagues had the benefit of being a man, Francesco Cavalli. He was able to own money and property, so he paid for his music to be preserved. He paid for the music he wrote. He was not as popular as Strozzi, but he paid for the music that he wrote to be preserved after his death, and then he paid an additional fee to have some of his favorite pieces played on the anniversary of his death. Well, Strozzi wasn't able to own money at that point in history, so her music was preserved in an attic and almost by accident. But Cavalli's music was quite intentionally preserved, so he has a place in the International Music Symposium canon, Whereas Strozzi does not because she wasn't as capable or because her music wasn't as good, but simply because she wasn't able to own the means to preserve her own music.
Yeah.
When the Bank of England did a look at the 20-pound note, there was a push to get a woman on it, but the complaint that the Bank of England ran into was that, well, there aren't that many famous women, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because I can probably think of 3 or 4 that deserve to be on a 20-pound note or a $20 bill. Harriet Tubman springs instantly to mind, Marie Curie. These are women that are real and famous, but they are the exceptions, not the norm.
Yeah, well, it's like being treated as having a defect in a way. Like, and it goes back to, it goes back to Aristotle, right? Simone de Beauvoir points that out, that Aristotle was like, we should define woman as somebody that's lacking certain qualities, that's defective in some way, which is, and she gives other examples that it's not simply there's a positive and a negative here, like a masculine, feminine. It's not this duality. It's that the men take up the space of the positive and the neutral, where the women get the negative. And that's again Simone de Beauvoir still, but woman coming from just a supernumerous bone of Adam, that's just one he didn't need or whatever.
Well, I think of it.
The original sin.
Yeah. I think it's also just in the way that sometimes women will be described and being dramatic or being too emotional. Like men get the chance to be aggressive and to be assertive. When women do it, there's something wrong with us. We should not be doing that. It's something with our tone. It's something with our action. Or sometimes even in history, we would be considered ill. And I don't think that always was the case.
Yeah, hysterical or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the gap is real. And it's been documented if you look for it. But it's not like there's a secret history that men are actively concealing. It's just, that's just how it's worked out.
Even according to Pew Research in 2023, 34% of women say it's harder to advance in the workplace, and 21% of men thought it was harder to advance in the workplace. And then there were 20% of women who actually thought not hard at all, which I think sometimes you have to take into account might not have been hard for them. But that doesn't negate the 34%. And then you had 20 that were neutral. Yeah. But 34% is a pretty high number of women with an experience saying it's quite hard to advance in a workplace.
Yeah.
I had an interesting experience a few weeks ago at my job. There was a younger lady who was a chance to go to a class and to kind of get better and increase her technical skill. And so I emailed her work department. I'm like, hey, would you mind if we put her into this class? And the answer I got back was, no, we don't want her in this class. And so I wrote back and said, well, why? Because I think she'd be a great candidate. And the answer was really interesting. There were a couple of performance-based reasons. Well, she failed this academic test, and she isn't doing this one thing we need her to do. But the first 2 reasons were she has a bad attitude and she wears her sleeves rolled up at work, which are definitely reasons to refuse to send somebody to education and training. It's just really unforgivable to have your sleeves rolled up.
Yeah.
That's definitely an absurdity.
Yeah. That seems, it's one of those things where they would be like, no, it's men shouldn't do it either or something, but you know damn well that is not applied equitably across the board.
I think it's even in the way that it's perfectly acceptable for a man to go out and mow the lawn without his shirt because it's hot.
Yeah. Sure.
It's not perfectly acceptable for me to go mow the lawn. It's still hot without a shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because men have nipples too.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
You can, you can sell breasts, but you can't have breasts in America.
Yeah.
Because that would be somehow worse than selling them.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So, it seems it might be, again, I think the answer is obvious, that there is, in fact, a gap between the treatment of women, treatment of men and the treatment of women. And not only that, but there's other genders, transgender and non-binary. Like there's definitely going to be a gap in how they're treated, right? And but sometimes, it's I think y'all do a good job of pointing to the empirical facts of it, like it is, and it's not just a bit of anecdotal experience here and there. It's clear, from whatever data you want to pull, right?
I have a question. So, I know that when we were talking on Saturday, we talked about tech companies, right, in particular. So I went on, did a little bit of research on that, and then I started to find that 15% of of the tech companies that are out there are men or funded by women, right? I mean, that's a,
more
out
than
of
I would
85%,
Yeah.
that's kind of crazy, but, no, excuse me, 80%, sorry, 85%. Math is all over the place.
Public math too makes it worse.
Public
That's how I
education.
felt.
Thank you. And then, even within those, and again, that's global. It's not even in the U.S. So then I started looking at, okay, so what about in the U.S. about these same type of companies, tech, this and the other, and I started to see that 2% were funded by women, and not just that, but so the government has to give 23% of their major contracts to small businesses. Now, small business by definition is anything that is 500 to 1,500 employees or less, and the annual, depending on the field, and then the annual salary, not salary, but cost or whatever for that particular field would have to be anywhere between $8 million and $40 million. And that's still considered small business. So with that 23%, I started looking at it, and it was, well, obviously men get majority of it. White men specifically get majority of it. And then it goes down to Asians, Hispanics, blacks, and then American Native Americans, American natives and Alaskan natives or whatever, right? So I was like, man, that's crazy. So, and then I started looking into the SBA, right? Because a lot of that's all linked together as well. And the Small Business Administration gave out $27.5 billion in grants, loans, this and the other, right? And again, y'all got shitted on with those too. So, and for myself, from a gender standpoint, I can't was to relate because I'll never understand what a woman has to go through. But as a black dude in America, I can relate to getting shitted on every chance that our government gets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I said, okay, let me look at it from another standpoint so I could try to kind of relate to, what you guys are talking about. And so some years ago, again, Jada Pinkett Smith and Will were in the news about Oscars being so white, right?
I remember that. Yep.
Years ago. Before then, I was always wondering, because there's always the same type of movies, same type of musical score, which I know you love.
Same actor
But
getting the same
actors,
award.
Same, everybody's getting
Yep.
the same stuff. And I started thinking about that. I'm like, okay, well, it's Hollywood, and again, sorry, Mike, it's built by someone else. It's not our stuff. So, if it's not our stuff, can we really get pissed off if somebody doesn't offer us the roles? If somebody's not paying us enough? And I've heard several women talk about, dude, I did this particular role. My other counterpart did the same thing. He got paid millions. I got paid this and the other, but at the same time, you signed the contract beforehand. So you knew that your counterpart was going to make that, and you didn't say anything. You signed, and then later on, you spoke up like, oh, this is a huge injustice, this and the other, which I'm not saying that it's not. I'm saying that.
Do you
Kinda
think
like-
she saw his contract before signing?
Because
Because she probably only saw her contract saying what it
No,
was.
I'm talking about a different movie
Oh, okay.
or whatever, where you do see somebody else's stuff or whatever, because they're just like basketball players. They're always putting up, oh yeah, we gave such and such this amount of money. So you know that if this guy got 1.3 million, but you got 200,000, you know that. So what I'm saying is that, like when I was looking at the Oscar So White thing, why don't we, in the black diaspora, in our culture, we have so much money that it is unbelievable. But yet instead, we never collectively put it together and build our own stuff, right? Never.
Yeah, never organized. So that was one of the things that, sorry.
But sorry, so my whole thing is that if and I'm not gonna beat up on my people because it's easy to do that, but to compare kind of the same thing, I was always wondering, why not just build our own stuff so then therefore we don't have to be going and looking for merit from somebody else. And then it dawned on me that, well, we did have our own stuff, and then what do? We sold off on it, or we sold it off to somebody else for commercial rights, or we basically broke it down like the government did to U.S. Steel back in the day, right? This whole monopoly type thing. So there is no one singularity of pushing forward because you have so many Judases who keep trying to tear it apart. And I was thinking about our conversation again on Saturday about, again, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but about Trump. And I was like, women voted for him too, knowing what he planned to do. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know if all knew exactly what his plan is. I mean, I think we're all still kind of trying to figure out what his plan is.
Very much so.
But by his own words, it was a concept of plans,
Right.
which is okay, I guess.
But
I would
grabbing him by
prefer
the
better.
pussy, we
But-
all knew that.
Yes, we knew he had said that, but as a woman who used to grow up in church and used to understand church, there was always the you submit to your husband. And so voting according to what your husband or your church a lot of the time would ask you to vote for is a thing. And I think also a lot of it is relying on your husband or men in your life to tell you what to think. I don't think a lot of the time we even realize when we're doing it. Like I will a lot of the time, like for instance, my notes even today, I was running it by my husband. But at the same time, I have my own thoughts and opinions.
Right.
But I still felt the need to run it by a man to get the approval.
I mean, and again, and not to call into it, but I mean, is it a man or is it your partner?
Well, in this
You
instance,
see
it's
what
my
I'm saying?
partner. But
So,
I think
mean,
they're...
You didn't call me like, hey, let me see what Fearless thinks. Because you care less. You know what I'm saying? And your kids are smart, like, especially Mike, oh my God. But you ain't running by him. I mean, you ran it by,
I actually did.
even better then, right? But state my point.
Because I know he won't always agree with me. And in
No,
our
he
house,
will
we are
not.
big on there should be room for disagreement. And I don't think a lot
Very
of
much.
houses provide that same opportunity.
Right, but you're married to a philosopher. So, like, you can't, I mean, that's not one of those arguments that you can be like, oh, well, no, this dude
Yeah.
is something else.
I do
So,
want to point out something, though, that
Right.
I have found. This is on the Department of Labor. A woman must complete at least one additional educational degree to earn as much as a man with less education. For instance, on average, a woman with an advanced degree earns less than a man with a bachelor's degree. Were it not for the fact that women attain a greater number of degrees than men, the gender wage gap would be even larger.
And that was from what now?
That was from the Department of Labor's website.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You run into that too, not only in business where a man with a bachelor's will make the same amount or more than a woman with a master's, but you run into it in academic writing as well. It's really interesting that women get published at a higher rate. Their research and their academic papers get published and adopted at a higher rate if there has been a double blind on the paper. So neither the reviewers nor the author is known to the journal that vets the paper. But if they know it's a woman, she's got about I want to say it's like a 36% lesser chance of her paper getting published if she has a name that's immediately visibly feminine on her paper.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just a weird.
But I mean, I also think though too that a lot of the financial gender disparities, I think that it also constitutes which fields we're talking about too, you know what I mean? Because not all, now there's some that are mostly dominated by men and they're going to make more, they're going to do
But why are
whatever.
they dominated by men?
No idea, I don't know. But I mean, look at the fashion industry, and that's one of the things that I was looking up, fashion, nursing, education.
Nursing, I was surprised to find actually that men nurses make more than women nurses.
Men
by
nurses
far.
do make more than
Yeah,
women nurses,
even though
and
they
they
have
get
the
promoted
experience.
faster.
Yeah.
So do you think that
Can
maybe
I-
that's good?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to get to a couple more questions before we
Okay.
finish this up, rather than
That's what I'm
because
saying.
we're kind of hanging on. Does this exist? And we know this
Yeah,
exists,
for sure.
you know. But what do you say? So Simone de Beauvoir, like writing this in like the 49, right, talks about how woman is treated as the other, how women are treated as the other of the man, right? And she's like,
My other half.
just the other,
not man.
that it's a sort of thing that to her establishes consciousness itself, is that you need that other, and there's a certain hostility there to the other. But and she gets that from Hegel. But the other to her, for man, is woman, and she's like, she notices something though, because you can say the same about other dynamics, right? For example, workers and capitalists. But she's like, but women don't organize and sort of subjectifies themselves and make the other out of the man the same way that proletarians do with the capitalists, or the same way that even black people will do. Like women in particular, she's like, don't organize that way, because they're kind of, she thinks that it's a matter of the lack of concrete means to do so.
Yeah.
But in any case, you can see in that other, there's the fear, right? There and sort of some sort of hostility, and some sort of sense of there's a threat in the other. What do you say to men who see that other as a threat?
Oh, please do.
So when I was looking into this, I found a statement that I really liked. Misogyny not only harms women, but it also harms men by enforcing harmful stereotypes and behaviors. Feminism just questions these norms, which helps free men from the pressure to conform to the rigid masculine ideals the manosphere values. And then I would just also like to say, men are surrounded by women. It impacts you just as much as us. It's not like we're trying to look at men as the target. We're just trying to get our space in the room,
Yeah.
which is Aubrey's thing of space. Like, we want to be heard and we want to be a part of what is happening to us and about us and with us.
I think it's interesting. I don't know of any men that I can think of who would describe feminism as a threat, because that would involve kind of showing that they might be threatened, an exposure of weakness. I do know some men who don't like feminism, think it's silly and fluffy, and we don't want those feminists in charge.
Yeah, they won't admit it's a threat.
Yeah,
You
it
can
would
see
be
the
it would
little-
be a weakness to admit that is a threat. So when I meet men who have that kind of outlook, it's always interesting to me, because I view feminism as a liberating force. You mentioned the 34% of women think it's harder to get promoted. It's a fairly commonly thrown around statistic that women make 84 cents to the man's dollar, but that assumes that you're a white woman. If you're a Latina woman, you're going to make something like 62 cents to a white man's dollar. But the idea is, in feminism, is not to put the women above the men. The idea in feminism is for everyone to receive the same. And men who see feminism as a threat, consciously or unconsciously, I think the thing that they fear is that they will be treated by women the way that they currently treat women. The same thing with people who see minorities as a threat. Well, we don't want those people in charge. What if they were as mean to us as we were to them?
Yeah.
Obviously, you'd be threatened in that
being
situation
mean.
because you have been unjust in the
Yeah.
past, and you worry about retribution.
And that's what when we were discussing Jane Elliott with the brown and blue-eyed testing. That's what that was what she was alluding to, was the reason why you know that you feel a way about this is because you know that this is wrong.
Yeah.
Because you would be upset too if somebody did the same thing to you. So why do you think that you feel justified to do this to others? So I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So when somebody says, "Hey, I feel threatened by this," well, that's really interesting. Why? What is it about me that is a threat to you?
But see, that's just it. I don't think that it would be you. I
It wouldn't
think
be me. I'm super
It would
nice.
be them in general. You know what I mean? So it's like, what is it about you that where you would feel threatened by me? You know what I'm saying? Because it wouldn't say anything about you. It would say more about me.
Yeah, it
Then it
does say
would
more about
you.
the person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, at least that's how I see that.
Yeah. Well, if you expect women to treat you the way that you have treated women, then perhaps that would actually be a threat. But feminism doesn't intend to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the antithesis of what feminism is.
Okay.
The point is not for women to take power out of men's hands, since that wouldn't change anything about the world. It's a question precisely of destroying the notion of power. Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
fun.
Thanks
It's a
for
fun
joining us. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. All right, where we at? Camera one. Here we are. So until next time, we will see you next week. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
All right. See you.
See ya.